Sayın konuklarımıza hoş geldin diyorum. Ben Kazım Şafak. Bizden önceki oturumlarda bir gecikme olduğu için 15 dakika geç başlıyoruz oturumumuza. O yüzden özür diliyoruz. Resitlerde öz kaynak ve proje finansmanı başlıklı oturum.
The equity in WPPs and project finance. So, Mr. Emre, Mr. Erdem, Mr. Tunç, and Ms. Özlem are with us. So, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Emre. Thank you very much. Hello to everybody. First of all, I will talk about the general sector, energy sector, and I would like to make an evaluation. If I look at this view, many important steps are taken, and legal changes have been made, and liberal steps were taken. And in terms of secondary legislation, a movement has been observed as well. So.
Bunu da şuradan görüyoruz çok net bir şekilde. Rakamsal detaylara bakmak gerekirse, bugün itibariyle özel sektörün kurulu gücü, yani piyasa riski alarak faaliyet gösteren özel sektörün kurulu gücü 19.000 megawata gelmiş durumda. Bu rakam 2000'li yıllarda sıfır seviyesindeydi. Bu da yatırımcıların sektöre güvenini gösteriyor.
So this shows the confidence in investors. So how this was financed? The majority was financed through the Turkish banks. Approximately in the last 5 years, the banks provided a loan of $25 million, and I think that this will continue likewise. Before going into detail of wind sector, I would like to talk about the requirement of infrastructure in Turkey in macro. When we look at macro level, as regards our calculation in the upcoming 5 years in the energy infrastructure, it would be about $100 billion. And which projects constitute this? Each year, for example, 3,000 to 4,000 megawatt projects, privatization of electric distribution, third bridge, so highway privatizations, hospitals, and third airports. When we just add these up, we are talking about $100,000 of requirement. So roughly, when we go with the credit capital, 75 to 25, we're talking about the $75 billion. And who will finance this? According to our calculations, the Turkish banks in the upcoming 5 years, just if I to give a rough figure, $50 billion of credit loan could be provided for these projects. Where does this figure come from? It comes from past. So in the last 5 years, the loan that was given to the infrastructure projects, it's about $50 billion. So you can see it from the official numbers, official figures. So this number is quite high. What did it cost? It cost, so the credit loan divided by capital is quite high. In 2000, the loan divided by capital, it's about 60%, and now it's about 100%. So it means that when I just collect the deposits and when I divide it by with the capital, it means that I can rotate, I can turn every kind of investment to loans. So it's not possible to be dependent on the deposits. So which means that we have to reach long-term loans. For example, Eurobonds, Guarantee Bank and other banks provided this 10-year maturity bonds were provided, and of course, as regards the total requirement and needs, these figures are still very low. So the international banks and international financing institutions supports are very important. So $75 billion cannot be met through Turkish banks, and it's rather difficult. So for that reason, there should be a support. If we look at the Fitch scoring, so the country rate is high. So the foreign capital and foreign financiers should provide more support. And if we go into detail of wind sector, we're just talking about 2,200 megawatts. So for a project with 8 100 megawatt, it certainly finds a finance. So 3,000 megawatt project has financing, and our 2023 target is 20,000 megawatts. So we have to have more projects. So this will require $20 billion of loan and $5 billion of equity. So here, is it possible to have loan of $20 billion? It's difficult, but we may find it. But the real question is that for the wind sector, do we have $5 billion of capital in Turkey? For example, if we include the other thermic stations or plants, we have to seek and we have to consider that there is certainly a serious amount of need, and we have to consider this. This is what is important in terms of access to finance. If we evaluate the situation likewise, actually, I can deal with this situation on two levels. One of them is Newman crisis and the existing situation. Just before Newman crisis, Turkish banks, especially in terms of interest, the interest levels were quite attractive. If we to give numbers, we can talk about high numbers. So it was quite attractive. So we didn't apply to Exim Bank credits, but after the Newman crisis, the interest margins quite increased a lot. So we're just talking about the for a 10-year loan, we're just talking about 6.6 point interest. And at this point, we have just had a very positive development. Interest rates increased, and then Exim Bank credit loans helped. And if we talk about the Exim Bank loans in this structure, of course there are some exceptions, but Turkish Bank becomes a guarantor for a debtor. And within the scope of this guaranteeing, this Exim institution where the turbines are produced, they prepare a package, and this also ensures and provides a guarantee, and through a banking and a cash flow, a cash financing can be ensured. So funding can be ensured. So here, investor can easily access to financing conditions, and also the maturity is long. For example, 16 years, and some of the projects 18 years of maturity can be. It's possible to have 18 years of maturity. So for that reason, the local banks, rather than their local resources, we see that the Exim Bank resourced loans are used, and we believe in future, and I think that this is really an opportunity for the wind turbines with wind investments. And another positive development is that that green energy fields for funds, and these funds are used for the geothermal projects. For example, the international financing institution just sits with the local bank and signs an agreement, and under which conditions the loan will be used, and what will be the installed capacity of the project, and how the environmental risk will be tackled, and within a certain agreement, these are considered and tackled, and afterwards this credit loan is given to the local bank, and this fund, which is taken from Exim Bank, from the international institution, this is reflected, or this is transmitted to the projects. It is certainly a good opportunity, and the maturity is about 12 years, so we use these frequently. But the most important issue or problem here is that the scale of these funds are not enough. So these are not enough to meet our projects at macro level. So we're just expecting them to increase so that we can support these projects with appropriate interest conditions. Another important development is Turkish Lira financing. So Turkish lira interest had a problem with the foreign currency. So in the last year, years, because of the regression in Turkish lira interest, the difference in between has declined to 4 to 5%. I'm talking about long-term financing loans. So for that reason, Turkish lira-based loans are quite attractive. And within this scope, we have provided a long-term financing, loan financing, we have realized, and we have provided for a project for a long 10-year loan. At the end of the day, funding on TL side the risk is lower if we compare it with foreign currency. So for that reason, we hope that such implementations would be increased, especially for the wind investments, for the projects where, for example, local resources are used, for highways, for wind power plants. So we recommend that the investors use 25% would be Turkish lira loan, and the rest would be in foreign currencies. So what I would like to say in brief is that there are three basic issues in terms of access to finance. I would like to enlighten the problems. One of them is the equity problem. In finance, the access to finance, equity is the major problem. In Turkey, it is possible to find project financing with an equity of 20-25%. Just apart from excluding the great investors, we know that we have a problem of access to financing loans, because banks, first of all, want this capital to be brought to the bank at the very beginning, and also they ask for certain guarantees that this project will be realized. And of course, we have to find solutions about these issues, and there's such a bottleneck in this regard at this point. And another issue is that the problem is that the projects, the measurements in the projects hinder the financing. As the banking on the side, on the field, we certainly expect to have a measurement at least for 1 year, and this measurement should be at least at the height of the tower, or at least 2/3 of the tower. And we see that the installation is not carried out within the standards, within the standards, and sometimes the anemometers could not be calibrated, and the installation are not done within the standards or in line with the standards. And another problem is that and on the sides, the measures on the sides, the data, long-term data between the distant stations, the correlation is not accurate. So this creates an obscurity for us. And another problem is that within the studies carried out, within the measurements are not standardized within the standards, so these affect us in finance-wise. So many of the projects could not be provided with finance. I think that there should be an initiative in this regard. And lastly, what I would like to say is that there's another problem. In Turkey, unfortunately, the construction agreements are not turnkey contracts. Why? Because the investors do not prefer such contracts, because the constructions go part by part and they are done on the unit basis. So for that reason, we have to take some guarantees, and these guarantees, I do not include the exceptions, but these guarantees are just valid for the period of the construction. And we tell the sponsor that accomplish this project, and you take it over, and then we will remove this guarantee, and we will go to the non-recourse period. And many of the non-recourse financing is present or not in Turkey. Most of the discussions are on this. So in Turkey, I am one of the banks which has provided finance for wind energy plants. And do we have non-recourse implementation? Yes, apart from constructions, we have it. So it is not the issue that we will do it, but we are already provided for the construction period. It is possible to have non-recourse. So there may be a turnkey contract which can be brought by the investor, but then they will be saved to have a guarantee at the end. But on the other hand, I'm ready to give guarantee. Turbine installation, transportation will be handled by another company, and the ways, the transformer, electricity, this will be done by another company, and accordingly I will take down the costs, reduce the costs. So in this case, of course, there is a need for guarantee for a certain period, and the option or the selection is left to the investor, and the second sub option is majorly chosen by the investor because they do not want the cost to go up. So non-recourse financing is present, and for the activity period, for sure it is, but for the construction, it is dependent on the contract status, and it is also dependent on the non-Turkey status. So, of course, we may certainly provide flexibility, but once again, I would like to underscore that this is really a mostly discussed, frequently discussed issue, and all the Turkish banks get a guarantee for all the period, all the maturity period. It's not right. Perhaps for 12 years of maturity, it's possible to have 1.5 year guarantee, but for the remaining part, we do not ask for a guarantee. This is the reality of the sector, but it's not known widely. I'm sure that there are some exceptions, and there will be some exceptions, but the general picture is likewise. And I would like to end like this. So far, we have financed as guarantee bank 34 wind plants, and we provided $1.5 billion of loan. Now, most of them are active right now, and we have a share of 40%, and we have the honor to have such a figure. If this capital problem is resolved or unsolved, and if the investor can show 20-25% of equity, and if this turnkey contracts are disseminated, become widespread, then if this operation becomes to a better point, I'm sure that the financing will become more, and accordingly, Turkish banks are ready to meet the need in this respect. And on the other hand, of course, we have international institutions support, and altogether, in order to reach the target of this sector, we will do what we can. Thank you very much, Mr. Emre, for your presentation. Now, I would like to give floor to N+1 Daruma, the Board of Management, the President of Board of Management, to Mr. Erdem Selim.
Thank you. To continue with the words of Emre Hatem, so as a continuation of that sentence, so last summer, as far as I'm concerned, for the first time in Turkey, we have closed a full non-recourse financing for a wind park in Karaburun, Izmir. So we have succeeded in such a structure. So we worked on this, and we believe that this could be done since 2007 when the law was enacted. So we have the necessary structures as of that date, but because there were some delays in the projects themselves, this took time more than we expected. And then we did it. Of course, I agree with Emre Hatem. He is right. So if there's an EPC contract, then this will make the work easier. Because when we say 75-85% of the contract, there is a supply of wind turbine, then the remaining parts, if the risk is undertaken by the turbine manufacturer, then the risks will be sold in a better way. So we didn't have such a structure in our example because investors do not choose this because it is costlier. So we have produced some legal solutions for this. So we also convinced Hermes and the foreign bank that we are working with, and during construction we passed this period in an unproblematic way, and we strive for disseminating this as far as possible. And the second point is, and also, again, in terms of ECF financing is in two types, rather than non-recourse. The first one is bank guarantee letter, letter of guarantee, or with institutional guarantee. So there shouldn't be a guarantee letter in between. So there may be structures lasting for 10 or 18 years. So letter of guarantee will not be available, but from ECA, of course, you will have an institutional guarantee. Since 2002, we provide such financing in Turkey as Daruma. So when we look at the Turkish example and when we look at the energy market, investments are slower than expected. So when we look at 2007, 2008, we expected to have 3,000 megawatt investments per year. So this was our expectation according to the EMRA reports, but such a performance cannot be achieved in the past years. Of course, there were some reasons for this, but as a result, when we come to the result, we couldn't have this performance. After this, when we come to the goal of 20,000 megawatt, this is also, again, not easy to achieve because we do not have that tempo, we do not have that momentum. So the biggest bottleneck for wind projects was the licensing of the 1st of November 2007 projects, and they are accomplished at the moment. Of course, I don't know to what extent this was advantageous or not. So my personal view is that some part of these projects are not feasible, do not seem feasible when we look at their investment figures at the moment, or when we look at the guarantee prices given to the renewable resources at the moment. So some of these projects are not feasible. And from this point, I would like to touch upon another problem in Turkey. So Turkish investors are we are an entrepreneurial society, community, nation. So for this reason, we intervene very fastly, but of course in the process everything happens. So they say that in the process we will see what happens. In terms of wind energy, investments, there is such an understanding, to my opinion, for wind investment turbine supplier. With turbine suppliers, there's an agreement. Then they come and install the wind turbines, and then the turbines begin to turn, and then we will sell energy. Yes, conceptually this is right, but wind energy investment is also very risky, from project development to permits, from permits to licenses. So even to micrositing. So despite all the foreign supports that you will have some problems when you do not have the necessary know-how and knowledge. So there are some fearful stories in the market. For example, the projects to produce, for example, 100 units, they just produce half of it stably because the micrositing was wrong, despite the support, foreign support. So when we say wind energy investment or energy investment, of course this requires technical know-how and patience and ambition, because investment lasts long. So as I given the example before, so before you develop the project till you turn the turbines, the minimum time for this is, the minimum is 2 years. So possibly this may take longer time. So to speed this up, there are some measures being taken which slows down this process when we look at the legislative dimension of this issue, and there are some implementations obscuring the process. So for this reason, to achieve the goals, there is a need for change. And lastly, in terms of equities, I would like to say a couple of words. In our country, yes, we have a problem of equity. So our savings are not sufficient when we compare them with developed countries. And to realize these investments, the biggest bottleneck is debt, is in the part of equities rather than loans. So our assets, when we look at our actives, assets, investors' assets are very important. Yeah, this is natural, of course. So, because we pay attention to our own goods as a nation, but there are some legends in the myths in the nation. So, megawatt will be such $1 million. So, this is being said from one to another, and then we come to a point that there's an equity problem. So, how can we finance equities? We may bring a partner, or we may have a capital-like financing, but when you look at it, expectations of the investor and the realities of the market do not meet this. So I have a project, I have financing, but I cannot find equity. So most of the investors are saying so. So the solution, if you ask for the solution, then we should come to a middle point to so a rose cannot get rid of its spikes. So for this reason, the expectations may be lowered, can be decreased. So here there may be a common point that we can come together. So there are problems related to this. But for the year 2012, I am hopeful. So the license issue is solved, and in those projects, these are not sufficient projects because wind measurements are going on, and the available measurements are being revised to make them bankable. So of course this will take time, but as of 2013, I think the investments will be accelerated. To my opinion, this will be so, and this delayed backlog, an amount of it can be, I think, made lighter or easier in the coming years. Thank you, Mr. Erdem. At this point, as a person working in the investment company, so of course the criticism of the banks is very rightful. In terms of project development, there are drawbacks, yes. In terms of there is lack of equity, this is valid for all our country, and this is valid for our own sector also. But I see this. Please, closer to the microphone, please. Closer to the microphone. In 5-6 years, I think we have developed as a sector, and I think we have begun to learn to have international standard projects. So this is very natural, I think. This is a learning ability, skill, I think. And to my opinion, as a sector, we are learning very quickly because we have started from a very low level, but banks are more institutional structures. But I think we will go beyond them in a very short period of time, because we will know how to have international projects, but I do not know if they can finance international projects. Yes, of course, we have faults because we have some incompliances in our projects in terms of measurements, and there are some deviations in our projects. But of course, the loss is not for the banks, so we are crying. So the investors are crying, yelling because of this. So here, of course, equity is a very big problem in terms of Turkey. But of course, in terms of the guarantee structures of our banks, they should be in line with the global trends. For example, to give an example, the biggest fund of world cannot finance a project in Turkey if there is no EPC contract, I think, because they will not guarantee balance sheet. So as a fund, they do not have this chance. And structure in Turkey, I think, I am not sure if there's a company to have an EPC contract. Of course, this is a cost, but the addressee will give the guarantee, but there's not a structure for this. And from this perspective, in the world, there are green investments, and but these funds do not have a chance in Turkey at the moment. So thank you, and I would like to give the floor to Mr. Tunç Alyanak. Thank you, Mr. Kazım Şafak. So what you say, I will be speaking. So as IFC, we are the private sector branch of World Bank, and we're trying to support private sector. We're also financing some other countries other than Turkey. These are not just loans, and also we are providing some capital. So for this reason, when I'm providing my opinions, I will also show the international perspective as an international investor, what we pay attention to as a shareholder, and also an international financer, what we are looking at, what is important for us, and at which points we have difficulties and problems in Turkey. So I would like to talk about this. So in terms of shareholders, there are two perspectives. One is about income and investment conditions. The other one is the risks. So I name this as being envisaged. So here, the most important thing here is that the cost of the investment. Of course, every country has its own conditions, and these conditions determine the level of the costs. For example, for a wind power plant in Turkey, there may be an investment cost for $1 billion, but in Bulgaria, this may be 1.4 million euros, or in Romania, this may be lower. So, of course, the owner of the land, private, public, or all the measures taken. So what is the cost for this to researchers? So every country has different conditions for this. So of course, the other factor impacting this is that load factor. So this is a capacity rate. So when we look at Turkey, we have capacity factors between 30-35. This is reasonable. So if there is 40% factors, we name it as good. So there is a same evaluation abroad. So as capitalists, this attracts our attention. So related to Turkey, there is a special situation, and it's a very effective factor. This is contribution, shares, payments. So, for example, these packages consecutively was tendered, and as a result of these tenders, bids, with calculations or without calculations, investors suggested some contributions, and then they provided this from TWEC. But when we look at this, some projects have high contribution shares. So for this reason, the achievement, the income of that project is becoming lower, and this project cannot be done because of this. So here, one of the most important factors is the term of the guarantee. So if it is long term, and if the interest is low, then it is useful. So this is what we want as capitalists. So when we look at the investment conditions, the interest rates, when we compare this with Bulgaria or Romania, we are not at the same level. We have higher interest levels, rates. So the main reason for this was coming from risk factors, but now it is coming from the reserve policy of central bank, and also from the other monetary policies. So in a foreseen term, of course, we do not foresee that these interest rates will go down. And also, I kept the most important one to the last point. So electricity prices are very important in the conditions of Turkey.
Different than other countries, long-term, long maturity, electrical purchase agreements, we do not have this. So the feed-in tariff mechanisms, existing mechanisms, do not provide high prices. So for that reason, there is a market risk that has to be taken. So, for example, think that as an investor, as a capital owner, this may change according to you, but between 7 to 12, you have to estimate and you have to foresee the prices in the market. So I have just talked about the revenues. What is the risk as the capital owners? What do we see? For example, one of the most important risks is that at what levels these prices will be. It has to be estimated, and we have to structure our investments accordingly. And another issue is that the environmental and social factors, and it is more on the agenda in Europe. For hydroelectric power plants, this is on the agenda. But for example, if similar responses should be valid for, similar responses may come along for wind projects as well. As the capital owners, the changes in the regulations are very important for us. Like, for example, let me just, as an example, we have just experienced it in a very in a short period of time. In a facility with 56,000 megawatts, we were an investor in this project, and in 2009 we invested this, and it started operating on time, and comparatively the investment level was great, and the feed-in tariff level, we were expecting to receive $117 per megawatt. So when we make a comparison with euro, 73 euros, it is really attractive. But in the mid of 2010, there was a change in the law, and this $117 declined to $97. As following this, in September, this started $96. Faced with a 10% of cut off, now it's now less than $80. So you have just identified the leverage, and so the expectations of the price are let alone or let aside, and you just go down to 86 euros, so $86. So as a capital owner, certainly there is problem. So if I am a creditor, I will first look at the revenue and risk with this hat as a creditor. And as a finance institution, what it is important for us is the interest. The more interest is high, the more revenue we have. And commission rates are very important. And lastly, as an international financing organization, we do not have side revenues, but the banks have got some side gains. For example, the flow of cash going through the bank, or the payment of salaries to the personnel of the bank. These may be some side revenues. And then second, related to the investment environment, the scale of the existing market. For example, we're talking about 11,000 of megawatt license stock, and 20,000 of megawatt is targeted. So this is the target in the market. So Turkey is taken to one of the greatest targets on the world. So for that reason, in terms of investors, Turkey is very attractive. And in the surrounding countries, for example, Montenegro or Bulgaria, if we look at the markets in those countries, such a market scale is not in discussion. So after these investment condition items, as a financer, what we pay attention to is that the risk. What is a risk and what can we do with this? This is a question. I have to divide this into two parts. I want to evaluate accordingly. The first one is related with the construction. And as Mr. Erdem and Emre mentioned, EPC contract is very important just during the period of time of construction. Many of the risks, a contract which covers the EPC, it's not very easy to find such a contract. It is not specific to Turkey, but it's also well known in other countries as well. What we have to do is that we do not have many options. Maybe this can be supported with additional contracts, then there will come along a coordination problem. EPC contract, you can have it, but you can have a plus contract, an additional contract, but in terms of time and capacity, the customer has to administer those. So for that reason, there's a difficulty experienced there. And the second issue is that related with the capital. So none of these investments are not cheap. So it requires high capital, and in a crisis environment and in an environment where there is no confidence imparted by the banks, this capital has to go further up. So operational process, operational term, I also would like to touch upon. For Turkey, unfortunately, long-term electricity selling is not in discussion. If you look at, for example, Croatia, it is 12 years. In Bulgaria, it's 15 years. And in Montenegro, for example, 12 years of electricity selling contracts are present. So your numbers or figures are clear from the very beginning. Your periods are clear from the very beginning in the unions that you go for. So in terms of financing, this really provides an advantage. So let alone set aside the obscurity of the electricity price. The third party where you will sell your electricity to, whether this the responding party or the opposite party will be able to make their payments on time. And also we have to evaluate as risk as a financer the foreseeability of the regulation. So the regulation should be foreseeable, and the regulatory authority the past activities, past behaviors have to be understood and have to be in such a way that they should be understood. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Tunç. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Özlem Atabey. Thank you very much, Mr. Kazım. Actually, I will just start from the point where you force the banks. Yes, we have to load some of the risks to the sponsors, but when we look at the period of operation as the bank, the feasibility studies, if the feasibility studies satisfy us, and during the operation period, if there are, we have to be comfortable with the finances which are irrevocable. So in 2012 there were funds. So in Resport first, for example, there were good purchases. So while we were talking about this financing, in terms of providing guarantee during investment, we didn't see any reluctance. These were all during operation time, and so this was always discussed during the time of operation. And as the banks, as mentioned by Mr. Emre previously, from the certain perspectives in some projects during operation, undertaking the project risk and undertaking the risk, we could give opportunities to sponsors, and we we started working on the projects where we could undertake the risk. And as each bank, when we look on 2012, 500 megawatt project has been examined. This was an EPP project, so we can say that we have already reached the speed of the wind in this year. So of course this sector requires to make more investment, and we all articulate this. And at this point there was the example of Spain, and the critical example in order to approach and approximate to Spain example, the banking system has to support the EPP sector. This is one of the critical points, and this will certainly, with the financing structure, which will make the financiers and the investors comfortable, we can do this. But what minimum, what do we do? What do we look at? And we also discussed this in the morning sessions in detail. That especially in terms of wind measurements in the old projects we examined, we did not in the projects where we could not find any wind, we can easily, the companies can present us measurements where there is wind. So the EPP projects can be easily analyzed. Of course, there is an imbalance in contribution shares. So the portfolio average is about 1.91 Turkish lira cent per kilowatt. So as the bank, this average as a bank, we will be more willing for the projects which will ensure us with this price and more. And when we look at the wind atlas, we make our options, we make our selections as the investor do. For the renewable portfolio, when you look at the issue, what it is important is that the EPP projects compared to hydro and geothermal projects, the risk is more minimized, because what we discussed during investment time, we get some guarantees and we request some guarantee from investors. So for that reason, we know that the EPP projects are less risked, and as regards the turbine suppliers, the sponsors actually send some of the capital at the very beginning, and we can easily construct the structure. So for that reason, investments risk for 1 or years, this can be carried as, and this can be undertaken in terms of the financiers and investors. Thank you very much, Ms. Özlem. Yes, these long measurements are thanks to EMBRA, because the processes take 4 to 5 years. Now, we just proceed with the Q&A session, so just let me first ask the first question, and I will afterwards leave the floor to you. All investors may answer the question, and as the investors were wondering about the local production share, contribution share, but we also confront with net bottleneck. Let's say that, for example, we supply the wing from Turkey and the other part as well, and we cannot fit in the Exim Bank limits, loan limits right now in Turkey. And we would certainly need financing bridge models. Do you have any solutions, and do you work on any of these solutions? Let me just first ask the question, and you will follow the others. I have just mentioned about that. We thought that EC credit loans were with us, and this problem came along, confronted us, and we want to benefit from the local contribution, but meanwhile we lose the EC benefit. So maybe there can be a balance established here, but as we just mentioned, the funds are very important. If we will not be able to get loans from Exim Bank due to local contribution share. So I really pay importance to these funds. In the first 6 months in this year, when everything has stopped, these really benefited us. So for that reason, with international organizations, if we can negotiate and discuss with them, and if we can increase the amount of these funds, where for the projects where we cannot go to Exim Bank, this will certainly provide us an alternative. And I think that the importance of these funds will gain more importance in time. I would like to make an addition that, first of all, with local production, and ECA insurance is not lost, or guarantee is not lost. So some parts could be excluded from the scope of the guarantee or insurance, but this would not be an important amount. So even the tower and the winds are locally produced. At least 25% or other parts may come from abroad or imported materials, and these will certainly total up to some amount to be covered by the insurance. So here as well, turbine producer has a great load as well. The local costs, so 30% of the total contract can be included into insurance scope. So for that reason, turbine producer, which will insure the invoice, since although the parts will be produced locally, these may be included into the insurance scope. So I think it is more easy to reach to the solutions on the side of the producers.
Aslında ben de benzer bir
I'm also at a similar point. Normally, in the upcoming period, if local production is on the agenda, so in the structures that we will establish, it will not be only single trade bank structure, or it will be an EBRD will be providing some resources, and leasing possibilities may be born, but this will not be complex, but there may be a holistic packaging requirement, especially in terms of this clean energy items. This is one of the local production and reflection on the prices in this sector. When there are more clear steps, they as well would be more willing to increase the financing to the banks, because this was one of the questions. This is one of the questions when they hold meetings with us in terms of the projects in the country. So where the studies and works go in terms of this field, what are the projects? These are the questions. So this is really a critical point and issue, and the solution is not a single bank solution, but it is rather to be coordinated under a trade bank, commercial bank. So this would be resolved by this method.
I would like to make an addition. In Turkey, we didn't do this, but abroad we're working with ECAs, and we are financing some part of them. As Mr. Emre said, we can provide funds to the banks, and these funds are used for the parts which are not accepted by the ECA. So of course I agree with Mr. Azam also. Yes, local contribution. This is named as local contribution, but I don't know if there's an investor who can receive local contribution. Of course, we would like to see this because our modelings will be based on those. So for the future of that money, we should have an assumption. So if this can't be taken, and if the investment is not complying with the definition, then there may be a problem. We can receive questions from the participants. Ferit Kalfaoğlu. So before developing projects and during construction periods, in terms of audit services and importance of audit services and third-party surveillance systems. So you never told about this, and also you never told about the efficient operation of the enterprise. So this will ensure the repayment or the project to payback. So for this reason, what are your plans in this respect as being such finance organizations? Yes, you're right. This is a very important issue. So of course, we seek for some criteria for the enterprises. For example, long-term maintenance and repair agreements, of course, are being signed with the turbine suppliers. Of course, this should cover the first 5 years, and this should guarantee a certain amount of availability, and there should be a guarantee that spare parts will be also provided by that maintenance and repair company. And of course, we ask for such contracts. So for this reason, the maintenance risk, for example, or for example, if the project is not available despite there is wind, so at that time third parties undertake the risk. So we withdraw this risk and dispose this risk in this way. Of course, we demand, for example, long-term maintenance and repair agreements. Some investors tolerate this, but the other ones say that this is a very costly contract. We can maintain and repair these wind turbines. They may have such approaches, but of course we can evaluate this as on the transaction basis. But of course, for the first period, maybe because this is the very risky period, there may be a long-term maintenance and repair agreement and also an availability guarantee. Of course, we feel the lack of these structure. Again, we are coming to non-recourse financing, but this is again a barrier in front of non-recourse financing. When you go to a European bank now, when you say, I don't have maintenance and repair agreement and I will repair this myself, you cannot find financing in Europe. So we do not have the structure, so this makes our work difficult. And also this turnkey contracts and also long-term maintenance and repair agreements are being widespread. So for this reason, this makes us happy, and in most of our projects we have these contracts, and I hope that this will be continued in the future. The microphone is not switched on. With monitoring services, follow up with monitoring services. So this should also be controlled. In Turkey, investors, for example, after having the agreement, the repair and maintenance agreement, turbine firm is thought to give the maximum performance. So here, investors do not control the turbine companies. So when there is a problem in a facility, this should be solved in 45 minutes, but this is solved in 4 days. So this decreases the efficiency of the facility. But when we do not go in such detail, then we cannot make maximum use of the facilities. So for this reason, this service should be taken during operation. Yes, I agree 100%. Of course, we demand this also too. But in the market, as we said before, we're in a learning process and we're in an adaptation process. So all these criteria are demanded by us from the beginning. So to have the project financing structure. But of course, this is not accepted easily in the market. So we have difficulty in the site. For example, in terms of monitoring services, during construction, for example, there is a concept of monitoring services, but we are barely adapting this to the market. For example, a couple of years ago, in a hydraulic power plant project, we said that we will be consulting and also we will finance this, and the consultant will go to the field and control the value for money and the accountability and the process of the construction. But there were reactions against us at that time when the investors were asking that, don't you trust us? So now we have overcome all these. So now investors are accustomed to accept these agreements. But now monitoring services during operation, these are not widespread. Of course, they should be in place, but what I see in the market is these are very rare. But of course, they will increase in number in the future, and the investors also, if they attach importance to this, then this will pay back. This will pay back to them also, because this will bring them value, and maybe that project may not be available, so for that reason it may not produce energy, and this will be lost, so this will be prevented. And also via monitoring services we will our appetite of having projects and also finance will increase. A small contribution. So technical consultancy services. So in WPP projects, especially in terms of scope, we are negotiating seriously still with the companies, with not just operation issues. They say that the company I hired looked at it, and also with my measurements I satisfied you. And during investment, especially in terms of environmental fields, areas, in terms of environmental consultancy scopes, we negotiate for the articles, items one by one. But of course, in our structures, of course, the monitoring services are built to have these also in the operation process. So even when we have more WPP in operation, and when we have more projects, of course, I think demands of the banks will be reasonable. But investment phase monitoring services, even in this phase, we have problems with the investors, especially the environmental issues are still a problem during the first phase of the WPP projects. My name is Kenan Kahraman. I'm an investor. So my question will be addressing Özlem. Ms. Özlem. So in your speech, you told about projects having a contribution under 1.91 piasters per kilowatt per hour. So of course, as you all know, after 78,000 megawatts, this contribution issue was put on the agenda, and all the investors agreed to give this contribution to remove competition. Of course, licenses were given, and of course, in the licenses, measurements were important or not, or one-year measurements were done or not, but these are formed at the end. So when we come back to the project, so in terms of its finance, financial dimension, if a project can be financed or not. So according to the wind levels of different regions, there were some tenders, bids. So when we look at Balıkesir and Izmir region, so the wind level there and the wind values there, they have high capacity factors, so the added values increase there because there is more efficiency and more energy production there, so the contribution is more attractive in terms of the investors, and the contribution is higher there. So you said that under 1.91 piasters. So when a contribution is higher, 4.5 if there is a wind speed of 8.5, so is it valuable for you or not?
Biraz yanlış anlaşılmaya yer vermiş olduk.
I think there is a misunderstanding. So when we look at the project, of course, the production value versus contribution share. So we look all the general feasibility, and as you said, as in terms of high wind speed values, or if in some regions the wind values are higher, then the contribution
Genel proje fizibilitemizi çok da etkilemeyecektir ve yine de
is also higher, but this will not affect our project feasibility. Again, the project will be financing, but I told about that figure to give you a general overview, because when you look at the general portfolio in Turkey, we have such a value. So, of course, it's not true to say under that or above that, but in some regions, if the wind speed is lower, then in financing, they are becoming less, and they will become less preferred projects. We should accept this altogether, but you are right. Just, of course, we are not just looking one single parameter. So, of course, when we evaluate this with more than one factors, if some regions are disadvantaged because of the wind, and if contribution payments do not lift this, then the project will not be eligible for us.
İyi günler.
Hello.
Dünden bu yana bu kongreye
Since yesterday, coming to this Congress. This is a very good Congress, really.
özür diliyorum.
Sorry, İsmail Erkoç. I'm electrical engineer, Meriç Wind Corporate in Thrace region. So in the recent years, this is a very comprehensive Congress that I've seen in recent years. I am in the session because this is related with me. So in the year 2007, I had my individual application, and I got a license for 3.5 megawatt. And as I know the procedure to fulfill the governmental procedures, I went to BGM, forestry, and I went to Edirne Governorate for construction plans. But the most important problem was the finance issues. So I went to the Industrial Development Bank in Istanbul. They said that we have 500 million euros from European Development Bank, and we use this in larger firms in Turkey. You have a very small investment, so you should go to the Development Bank, they said. So I went to the Development Bank in Ankara, and Development Bank in Ankara is a bank of the state. So they said that yes, this is a very good project, but we give loans in return for a guarantee. So you should go to a private bank, and you should take a letter of guarantee from that private bank. Then we can give you 12 euro 14-year loan, which will not be paid back for the first 2 years. So this was okay for us. So when we come back to our hometown, we went to my bank, which I worked for 35 years. My bank is İş Bank. The branch office manager was interested in it, and they said that we can give this loan. So what do you have, he asked. So for 3 megawatt, we applied for 3 megawatt. 15% was equity, and the rest will be loan. I could have applied for 10, 30, or 15 megawatts, but the eligible megawatt for me was 3. So 15% is in my bank account. So I sought for loan for the rest. So İş Bank said that you should give me guarantee for that, for the remaining part. Of course, the electricity produced is taken by the state. So give him money piece by piece, and the service will be yours, or the good will be yours. If you want to give us No, they said, give us immovable records, registry documents, or you have a credible firm. I'm an electrical engineer, so I am working, I'm a freelancer for 32 years, and I don't have such a trade company, so I am selling my engineering, so we do not have a credible company, so then this is not possible. So we went to the Yapı Kredi Bank, but this is construction credit bank. They said no. So they sent me to go to a turbine firm and told to a turbine firm. I went to a turbine firm company, and I have a measurement for 50-meter piles. And this is very easy, they said. Don't install just one turbine. Go back and change your project and change it into 5 megawatts. So 5 megawatt mechanic and 3 megawatt electric production. So again we spent money. Again we came back to turbine company, but they said that the foreign funds do not see this eligible. So there are two fund managers and bank managers there sitting on the seats. If you want to help us, so if you came here and if you want to contribute to such companies, so the firm will have a 10-year contract with the government, so this will be lower than the government market price. So via $7.3 there will be a 10-year agreement. So this facility will pay back in 7.8 years. So you look for guarantee. I cannot give guarantee. If I have that immovable, I can sell them and I can build my company myself. So if you want to help us, don't you victimize that investor. So where is the help of banks then? So my brother said that this was the case in Bulgaria, Romania. So I have two companies in Bulgaria for years. In Bulgaria, its democracy is lower than Turkey. Corruption is 5-fold compared to Turkey. And to have a license, you have to bribe to 3 different general directors, and you give loans, you are financing, and in such a country like Turkey, you are not on the play, you are not appearing, so I cannot understand this. Please explain this. And I say again, I wish you a good day again. So this is a very unlucky experience. Thank you for sharing this with us. Of course, as we said before, sector has changed, finance has changed. So in Turkey, project finance perspective, or we cannot give the answer as yes always. But of course, when the risks go down in the market, when the managerial risks go down, and when the know-how is increased, and then the small-scale projects can be financed. Now we're talking about 500 kilowatts. So how can we do this? And how can the banks have package pricing? So for example, SMEs, what kind of energy financing can be given? So today we're talking about it. 1 year ago we were not talking about this. So with the sector, banks in this sector should work as quick as you. And again, I will give the say to my colleague. Microphone. So the solution is that, as I said before, so I can give 20% to you. So for the 80%, what kind of immovable you ask for? If I have the immovable, I can sell it and I can do my project, because this pays me back more than immovable. So the banks should change their mentality. So here, of course, wind has a guarantee of purchase. If there's an accurate feasibility report, and if it pays back in 7 or 8 years, then I do not ask for any other loans from this guy, and the government, the agreement with the government can be a guarantee for you, and please open the way for us. So you are victimizing us. So as I said before, so in the investment period, of course, there are some risks envisaged by us and there are some experienced risks. So in terms of guarantee, of course, you are expected to give us guarantee, but your project or in the current structure, we can look at the project once again, revisit the project, and if it can be financed, we can finance it, but you may not have the financing at the level that you want. So, because the expectations of the bank or the expectations of our bank cannot be covered by your project. I don't know the past, of course. I cannot give any detailed explanation to you because I don't know which is what is examined, what are the data of the project. Maybe we have seen a risk, for example, which isn't conveyed to you. But of course, I agree with you. When all the risks are disposed of and when there's an institutional financing, of course we should open the way for this. And for housings, for example, for also commercial enterprises, we are trying to have these financial possibilities in parallel to our resources. This may not be enough for everybody, but in a time being, of course, Turkey has its projections and the energy sector is changing in Turkey, so these resource possibilities will increase. So, of course, what we can provide now at our hand is this. Microphone, please. Microphone, please.
Yani bütün bankalar için konuşuyorum.
So I am talking about all the banks. I am very angry. So since yesterday I am waiting for this. You are giving car credit without guarantee, without guarantors, but you do not give credit to the investors. Without microphone, no interpretation. So what kind of guarantee? If I can give guarantee, I can sell it and I can do it myself. So I think the problem you experience is that we are aware of the problem that you experience, especially in small projects. I think there are three main reasons for this. The first one is, of course, every bank has its project finances unit, and there are experts in the banks. But of course, we have limited human resources in these teams, so for this reason we cannot take into consideration all the projects. For example, in our bank, the project finance unit can look at, for example, 15 megawatt minimum. I cannot look, or my team cannot look to the projects under 15 megawatts. So this is the first drawback, I think, in banks for the small-scale projects, so relatively. 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, 3 megawatt projects. So the expert teams should be increased. The number of the expert teams should be increased. This may be a solution because this loan is evaluated as a commercial credit. So we can talk about guarantees here. But when we look at the view of the project financing unit, there may be another opinion. Of course, this is the problem of the sector. We can have self-criticism here. I think we cannot attach importance to the small-scale project because we lack of time and we lack of resources. And the larger-scale projects take our time also because you cannot have time to look at the other ones. And the second one is why we have such a structure. There's a traditional loan perspective. So, of course, from today to the other day, you cannot change this. Of course, for how many years we have project financing in Turkey? For 10 years, but in Europe this may be for 30 years. So, in the time being, we will implement this. Of course, we will also transfer this to the small-scale projects. What is the third reason? In action, in practice, of course, there are some very big problems in the construction phase. So there is not an unfortunately situation. So we have all the loans and now it is flawless. But in some projects, we have seen that we are starting with a project, but in the construction phase, the prices, the cost may increase. For example, the foreseen figure is $100 million, but then it goes up to $150 million. If this cannot be given, then the project cannot be accomplished. For example, with some court verdicts, decisions, for example, guarantee sometimes cancelled. Of course, when guarantee is formed, when it is accomplished, in the half of construction, for example, I constructed the half of the regulator, I had its transmission line, but there's no turbine and generator, and the check is, for example, cancelled. So how can I get my money back? The back the project is not over, I cannot go to the sponsor because I do not have the guarantee. So that credit is sunk then. So here we have these examples. So this credit committee is, of course, a little bit conservative. I agree with you, and I'm trying to give you the reasons. Yes, there are three problems. Of course, the solutions for this is that, first of all, banks can have time for small-scale project. Of course, this may not happen by night, but this is my personal opinion. And in time, you may remember constructors cannot find a letter of guarantee for the abroad constructions. For example, a constructor have a construction in Libya, for example. He should give a guarantee, letter of guarantee, but they couldn't at that time because there were some risks. So this problem was handled in the countrywide, and there was a fund established, a guarantee fund was established, and via this guarantee fund, these letter of guarantees were given and are being given. So same structure can be evaluated for the small-scale projects. So this is also very important. IFC support is also very important. We can come together, and banks and international finance institutions, and we can come together, and we can put the money to this fund. And with this money, this construction phase risks can be guaranteed. So the fund can undertake the risks. For example, this 3 megawatt loan, if you do not have a guarantee for this, for example, this can be financed via this fund. So I'm just brainstorming at the moment. And of course, please do not think that we are ignoring what you say. We are thinking about it. This is not easy for us. We have lots of projects in our hands for 100 megawatts, 150 megawatts. Not just energy. There is hospital, bridge projects. And of course, with certain human resource, we cannot take into account all of them. So from time to time, we skip some of them. So I think in time, we will, of course, overcome these problems. But there are problems in the sector at the moment. Yes, you're right.
Orada Bulgaristan örneğine değindiniz.
I've just touched upon a Bulgarian example, but Turkey provides more financement than Bulgaria. And the second issue is that it has been already explained in a best way, well. So how many people can deal with how many problems? If I to speak at the specific level IST, we can only provide finance to some projects through some banks, for example, Guaranty Bank and other banks. We are not only for Turkey, but we also have to consider the Middle East and as well as whole world. How we can do this in an effective way? We have to get involved the financing organization. If we act from the example of Bulgaria, so this credit or loan would be more than a loan to be given for a car. Let's say that, for example, we have trusted in you, and we believe that you will be operating this for 10 years in a very efficient way. And what happens if Mr. Ismail passes away? I wouldn't accept it. So Ismail Erkoç may die tomorrow, might pass away tomorrow. So the facility is there. You do not give the loan to the facility, to the subject, in the name of the company. Of course, during the construction, yes, before the construction is accomplished or the facilities are accomplished. What if before the construction is operated, you pass away, or who will take over it? So the EMRA does not make the person establish a company. It says that you have to establish a company, a corporate company. So it's possible that in a car, three partners of a company may pass away at one time. So this is not right. So there is a different kind of risk management in loans for cars. So these are very low loans. So you would appreciate that this energy project cannot be evaluated within the same scope. Thank you very much. Our time is almost up, so we will get the last question, and then afterwards we will close down the session.
Allah'tan kredi kuruluşu değilim.
Murat Akdeniz, Çapar Elektrik.
Murat Akdeniz, Çapar Elektrik.
Yatırımcı olarak toplantıya katıldı.
Have participated at the meeting as an investor. Thank you very much to our panelists as well as to moderator for the information and the valuable information you provided. When I came here, when I was coming here,
Bir yatırımcı sıfatıyla bazı sinyaller alabileceğimizi
when I was coming here, I had the hope that we could get some signals to get loans. And one of the signals I got was that
Emre Bey'in bahsettiği
previously we didn't know that Mr. Emre mentioned this, and our other panelists underlined this. This Daruma representative, and he mentioned that we have a different status. We can give guarantee during the time of construction. What do you mean by this? Does it mean that when the construction is accomplished, is over until the operation? What do you mean by guarantee? Do you need a letter of credit, a letter of guarantee, or does it mean that from the very beginning we have to blockade the equity? And secondly, related to equity, the general statements are that about 20%. These equity have to be about 25%, and this is what you see. And you have just set a higher figure. We always have the hope to have this equity go down. So the project data.
standartlara göre değerlemenin ve ölçümlerin yapılmış olup olmaması.
So what I mean by this is that to have the international standards checked or not, for example, to have the right length of the piles or not, and capacity as well.
35 ve üzerinde ise
If it is 30 or over 30, so
çekme yönünde bir eğiliminiz, bir
do you have any tendency that you would like to decrease the equity to 10%? Thank you very much. What kind of guarantee? Actually, we take a bailing. So if this is a letter of guarantee, it would be much better. But it is important to have bail because indemnity is very important. And there should be a flow of cash to have this entity as an indemnity. So the company has a certain regular flow of cash, and we look at the status of the company and we take bailment. And if a project is cancelled, this may happen because it happens already in Turkey. So in de facto, when I'm talking about this situation, when the project is not continued, when it is stopped, and for example, if the construction is cancelled and it doesn't continue, then we have to go to the company and we ask the company to pay the loan that we have lended. So this is important for bailment. We have to have the bailment, and I have just mentioned the pre-crisis and post-crisis, and 2008 has been unfortunately a milestone in a negative way. And before 2008, there was a lot of money. So there could be easy access to abundance of money. There was abundance of money, so the projects could be easily financed before 2008. And even in Europe, for example, there were projects with zero equity, 100% loan. For example, I know that there was a loan provided 111%. So sector even that did this in previous time. Just after the crisis, unfortunately, the rules of the game changed, and the banks started to look at the issue more conservative. So from 23%, this may go to 25%. We have to look at this issue likewise. In the energy sector, wind is the sector which needs the least capital, the least equity. For example, for the hydroelectric power plant, it is about 30%, and for coal, it's 35%. If it's natural gas, then the equity has to be about 50%. So according to the risk, the equity is differentiated. So wind has the least risk among them. So what we hope for is that we may go down to 10 to 15%. There's a kind of betterment in this respect, but in short term, this is not realistic, but we have to think it and consider it as 20%.
Özellikle öz kaynak konusunda ben hani sorunuza bir cevap
Especially in terms of equity, I would like to answer your question. Actually, we go through a mathematical formula. So if
yerli katkı
local contribution, if we can use the local contribution share with a certification, if we can guarantee this, then there's certainly an increase in revenue in the power plant. So we just prepare a flow, cash flow, and this belongs to bank. This is about $7.3, and we wish for to have a production of PL50 level, but they want it to be PL90. But in an open way, I see that the tower or wing, when we can provide it locally, the revenue would be $9.8, which increases the cash flow. So this 13% equity without risking it, I think that loans could be provided. So the problem is, likewise, there's no EPC agreement, and as an investor, there's no profit. So as mentioned, there are differences between us. The guarantee level is very low, and so for that reason, guarantee asks for equity, but at least it will ensure that the revenue that we expect and the bank expects as revenue would be at the same level. So for that reason, the equities, not this year, but if we can overcome the problems, the equity will be lowered, will be declined, will be decreased. Now, as a financial consultancy company, we're working with domestic companies as well as foreign companies, and we had the opportunity to get feedbacks, and to what I saw after the crisis 2008, the increase in equity rather than related with the financial issues, there's rather a psychological reason for that. And what is the reason is that there is a psychology that the investor should also take risk, should put his hand under the stone, what we call. So whoever provides the finance, the financer wants the investor to be involved, to take the risk. So this is one of the reasons for experiencing that risk. The investors do not take any risks, and they do not care for the guarantee, and they go for more becoming indebting. So there is such a bad experience. So it's not possible that the banks would be behaving as they behaved before 2008. So in such a short period of time, it's not possible to become likewise as it used to be in the past. So it is also possible that you can finance part of the equity, or capital-like loans could be used, but it has more. It has high cost, but it's flexible. For example, it requires a kind of profit share from a profit. It also has got a component. If your project has a capacity for generating a profit, then after having paid the bank loan, there is certainly a big amount of cash flow. So for that reason, a kind of financing should be, and this equity getting out of your pocket should be decreased. So from the perspective of the financing banks, this will be evaluated as the equity because the degree of the guarantee is the second level. So in our Turkish banks, there is not such a structure, and I don't think that our banks are prepared for this. And in worldwide, the private banks, for example, Deutsche Bank, for example, are doing this partially, and they also ask for some scales, and usually the fund providers do this. So far in the projects we have seen the capacity factor, even though it is about 40, the existing electricity selling sale price is low, so the net cash flow in between would not be sufficient, but there may always be some exceptions. So as I just mentioned, there may be sometimes exceptions. And as regards completing guarantee, what I would like to add is that here we also apply these models as the partner of the company, that if there are only individuals and if these individuals are in contact with the bank and if they are credible, then only with a bailing this can be done because then at this point it is not required that for sure that there should be the legal entity, so the individuals can also complete this process. Thank you very much to all our participants and the panelists. Thank you very much.